Welcome to another episode of Pilots Say What, where we get to hear what pilots have to say. And today we'll be talking with a special guest who's actually in Australia, right? Are you currently in Australia?
Yes, yeah, Brisbane,
Great.
Australia.
Okay, great. And her name is Melanie. I'll allow her an opportunity to introduce herself, but she's written a book and she's worked with the Air Force and the Air Cadets, and it seems like you have quite a bit of experience all around aviation. So if you wouldn't mind, Melanie, just introducing yourself for a moment.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Melanie
Sure.
Hill, and I'm an
Mhm.
author, but I'm also a supply officer or former Air Force supply officer. And I've written a book, Jett Cooper, which is a middle grade book targeted at between ages of 8 and 14 about a boy who wants to become an aerobatic race pilot. So if you think about Air Race X or the Red Bull Air Races, that's really the type
Mhm.
of flying that features in the book.
Right.
Yeah, and I've been a lover of aviation since I was a small child. So it's exciting to be here, and thank you for having me, Zach. It's really lovely to speak to
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you for joining in, and it's exciting to hear about the aerobatic concept because we recently release an aerobatic portion of our program that's coupled with the upset recovery training with our CEO. He has the air. What is he? He has the game bird. So we do some pretty cool training with that, and some students have been enjoying that process. So that's pretty cool. Uh, can you tell me a little bit about when you first remember wanting to get involved with planes or aviation in general?
Well, yeah, I do. It's funny that there's significant things that happen in your life, even when you're little, that they carry through with you for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
And I'm from a small town in Launceston, Tasmania, and we have family that lived interstate. So at Christmas time, which is our summer holidays, we would often go out to the airport to either go and visit them or have them come and visit us at Christmas time. So one of my
Right.
first memories of being in awe of flying and aviation was actually going out to our city's airport and just waiting for family and watching, passenger planes take off and land. And they had
Mhm.
these big windows, and as little kids do, go up, would go up and just put my hands and my face right up against the glass and just
Mhm.
watch aircraft take off and land. And right behind that was a replica, a sort of a glassed off area. It was a replica of an aircraft called the Southern Cross, which was
Mhm.
the first aircraft that one of Australia's aviation legends, Charles Kingsford Smith, flew. So he's one of the founders of Qantas, which is our international airline. Um,
Okay.
so that used to that was sitting behind me all the time, and so just running down the stairs and going and having a
Mhm.
look at that, and just looking at the colors and the shape and just imagining what it would be like to sit in that and fly, and then turning around and watching the aircraft take off and land really sparked my interest and fascination with flying. So I probably
Mhm.
was about 4 or 5 years old when I first remember doing that.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Actually, I can't think of things that I've carried with me so consistently into my adulthood. Maybe I do like cameras. So it makes me curious about what were some of the first steps you were able to take towards an aviation career? And I mean, you told me a bit about it before we started, but could you tell me a little more about how you took those first steps?
Yeah, well, I was in actually, I remember in year 7, so the first year of high school, my dad
Mhm.
sat me down and said, "What do you need to start thinking about what subjects you wanna take, what do you wanna do?" And through conversations with him, and so I would have been 12 or 13 at that age, at that stage, um,
Mhm.
talking to him about what I wanted to do, and I said, "Well, I wanna be a pilot." That's what I said. And
Yeah.
so that focused my school subjects going forward. So I did
Okay.
chemistry, physics, and those sorts of physical sciences.
Mhm.
But then that also led us to have a discussion about how to do things to help get involved in aviation. So I joined Air Cadets, which you
Mm.
start really at about 13 years old. So that's an organisation that's affiliated with and run by the Royal Australian Air Force. There's Navy cadets and Army cadets as well, and they're aligned with the services. But there was actually a flight, an Air Cadet flight in Launceston. So I joined
Mhm.
up and, went on camps, did lessons about aviation and flying and different types of aircraft and things like that. So I was with other kids my age that were also
Mhm.
interested in flying and the Air Force and being in the Air Force, or at least in the Australian Defence Force. And it was just a real sense of camaraderie. They weren't,
Right.
it wasn't around school. These friends were different from my school friends. So it was
Mhm.
a really lovely way to be, an exciting way to be, start expressing or learning more about aviation and a career in aviation.
And there's lots of little programs even in the U.S. where people can get involved even at young ages. But it doesn't sound like it sounds like there's maybe some room for something like that here. So,
Yeah,
That sounds really
maybe.
fascinating, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
so that must have done you well, I guess, because you did move on to work with the Air Force. Can you tell us a little bit more about the beginning of your career?
Yes, so I did, like I said, I wanted to be a pilot, but it turns out that
Yeah.
I don't have much spatial spatial awareness. So I didn't do
Uh,
so well in the aptitude testing. But
okay.
having said that, being around being in Air Cadets and having that
Mhm.
fascination, I was fortunate that I could do other things and still be involved in military aviation, even if I wasn't actually going to be a pilot myself. So at
Right.
that stage, I had a choice. I could have been an engineer or I could have been a supply officer. And I chose to be a supply officer. And that was a really good choice for me. I'm very good at being organized, at organizing other things, seeing
Okay.
what's needed, and and supporting not just the aircraft, but the people who fly the aircraft and the people who maintain and service the aircraft. So
Mhm.
I was very lucky that I could still go and do that and still be involved and still join the Air Force, because that was
Mhm.
something that I really loved and wanted to do.
I imagine that you got to see a really holistic picture, a really like full image of how a lot of that stuff works, and get to see a lot of the different roles and jobs. And the reason I bring this up is because um, sometimes I like to stress on here that there are so many different sorts of jobs centered around aviation, and I'm wondering, is there any more you could speak to about that? Can you say something for some of the people listening?
Yeah, so absolutely, and that was one of the
Yeah.
things that I wanted to in the preparation for getting on the podcast, was what are the
Mhm.
sorts of things, and answer some questions around those support roles, because
Mhm.
most people only really see the pointy end. They go and get on the aircraft, and the pilots and the crew take them where they from A to B, but there is
Right.
so much more to it. So, and I'm fortunate in my role now that I get
Mhm.
to support aircraft still. So in my career, I'm still involved in aviation and I do the
Mhm.
support things. So I look at what it takes to support an aircraft from the moment that it's bought right through
Mhm.
to the moment that it leaves service. And there are
Okay.
so many things that go into that. So there's contracting, and particularly for aviation spares, because the type of spares that we buy and the type of products we buy to support the actual
Mhm.
repair or maintenance of the aircraft are a higher standard than if you just go down to your local hardware store and buy, nuts, bolts, and screws. We have specialized paints. We have all these different types of things that sit at a higher standard of what we call
Mhm.
aeronautical product. So get to see all of those things. I get to see the training cycle as well. So where I work, we have apprentices, we have
Mhm.
trainees in all aspects of the business. So obviously there's the technical workforce, but we also have people in my field who need to come in and learn how to operate the systems, learn about all the quality products and how you run a quality system to make sure that the products that you're getting are of the right standard. So
Right.
you're right, there's just so much to it. And it goes over many, many years, because aircraft come in and they fly for in military aviation terms, they fly for 30 years. So
Yes.
it's a long time to support them, and you need to what they need at the beginning and what they need midway through their life and at the end are very different. So I get
Mm.
to see all of that as well and do the planning for that. So yeah, it's really varied and it's fascinating. So thank you for asking that question, because it's really nice to share that different aspect of what it takes to keep aircraft flying, but also, like you said, the diversity of the
Mhm.
roles.
'Cause so as, Thrust Flight, we're a school, a flight school, but we're also, have A&P. We have a maintenance school, so we also train people for their A&P, and we take a lot of pride in that as well. Can you before I ask you the next question, can you clarify your current role? It's not still, with the Air Force, right?
No, so I am now a contractor. So I work for Boeing Defence Australia, and we
Mhm.
are contracted to do the support for the Royal Australian Air Force of the fast jets. So we
Yeah.
support the Super Hornets and the Growlers, and I'm on that program. So while I'm not in the military anymore, I still
Mhm.
work with them and work alongside them to do all the planning and support of those aircraft.
That's really awesome. And so, what I want to ask is, first I'll say I'm fascinated by the way that you've still been able to have a career centered around the thing that you really want to like be around at least, right? So the aircraft. You're fascinated with the aircraft, and you still get to work with the aircraft. And on some level, I'm sure there's emails and paperwork to be done, as there is everywhere. But I think that that's really that's not always the easiest thing to do. You can get pulled in many different directions in your career, no matter how you navigate it. Is there any way you could sort of highlight uh, maybe the filter you were able to have when deciding what to do next, when little opportunities arose, or when it came time to move to another team or change your role title or things like that? Maybe there's an example you might have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so when I got out of, I did 18 years in the Air Force. And when I got out of the Air Force, I actually
Mhm.
joined a company that were contracted to upgrade and modify some of the Air Force's runways. So we were
Mhm.
getting C-17s, the Australian Air Force was getting C-17s, and that meant
Mhm.
that we needed to harden our runways and our taxiways and also our hard stand areas where the aircraft are parked, because they're massive, they're massive aircraft, and you don't want them to sink into the ground. So
Mhm.
I joined a company who was designing the airfields. So
Okay.
that was, and that's why they got me on board through, and I got employed with them through friends of mine who
Mhm.
also were working for them, because they had this work and they weren't familiar with working with the Air Force or working with that size of aircraft and doing
Mhm.
airfield design of that size. So I was
Mhm.
really lucky to leverage my contacts and my Air Force experience to be able to do that. And then for
Right.
a little bit, I pivoted away from aviation
Mhm.
into commemorative events and military commemorations. But
Okay.
then the events were ending, and I used some of my contacts, my friends, and people who knew other people who worked with Boeing Defence Australia, and managed to get a job with them.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you say that in terms of choices that you make. I started doing subcontracting, so more procurement style of work. And when I started
Mhm.
with them, they gave me a choice. They said, we have two jobs. They're virtually the same, but one works in the city in the corporate headquarters, and the other one is out at the Air Force Base working
Mhm.
on the Super Hornet and Growler program. Which one do you want?
Right.
And that was actually a very easy choice. And I went,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to go out and be on the airfield with the aircraft. And
Mhm.
so that was a nice choice. And I think reflective of the example that you've asked me, like there's points in your
Mhm.
career where you can pivot away or you can
Mhm.
pivot towards. And I grabbed that chance when I got to pivot towards being around aircraft and being on the base again.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. And not it goes to show what you like to do when you make a choice like that. And I would like to go just one layer deeper, I guess, and ask you if you, in any of those moments where you decided to maybe go into contract work, um, did you not? I'm wondering if you ever felt like maybe, is this going to send me in the right direction, or oh no, I'm a little nervous about what this job is going to be like because I don't know. And how did you kind of work through that kind of moment?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It because I knew contracting at a large scale, but
Hmm.
in terms of smaller procurement type of activities, yeah, it was a little
Hmm.
bit new to me. So I did feel very nervous about that, but I
Hmm.
was very lucky because Boeing, being the organization that it is, has training. They bring you up to speed with how they do things. So
Hmm.
I was reassured when I went for the interview that there would be training and support available. So that
Awesome.
um, negated some of the fear that I had about that.
Okay, gotcha. But you went for the interview before even knowing quite that, and I think that that's a good takeaway for me and maybe some listeners. So that's great. Okay, so you're still working, but you have written a book, and that's quite quite an accomplishment on its own. I'm wondering, did you always like to write, or where did that come from?
Yes, I did, and I've always written, and I think this is something that we as people forget, that while you can like I love aviation and being involved in it, but that's not the only
Mhm.
thing that I do, and that's not the only interest that I have. And I have always written, and I enjoy writing. And particularly, I started writing when poetry more than that was really the format that I loved the most when I was younger
Mhm.
and all the way through my career. And when I joined the Air Force, I went to the Defence Force Academy, and
Mhm.
I did a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature. So writing and reading have always been something that I've loved to do, which then I got to a point in my career where, again, I was thinking about what do I want to do? What are some interests that I want to take up? Because so I'm a mum as well. I've got 4 children. And when my youngest child was born, my husband and I had that chat again about, well, what do you want to do? Are there things that you want to do differently or the same? And I said, well, actually, I'd love to focus a bit more time on writing and learning how to write. And then that got me into focusing a little bit more on long form stories and writing books.
Right.
So that was another pivot point. And then I remember thinking, what sort of book could I write that would be really different? What is it that I love that's really different that
Mm.
there aren't many books about? And what sort of book would I like to have read when I was a child that is not being written? And that's when I
Mhm.
came up with the idea of writing my book, Jett Cooper, because there aren't many books for kids in that middle grade range about
Yeah.
flying or that feature flying as a main part of the story. So I
Right.
thought, oh, I may not be a pilot, but I'm in that world and I love that world. And that's something that I can really showcase in a novel
Yes.
about a boy who wants to be an aerobatic race pilot. So it took me a while to work that out, though. I really took, but once I did, the character just popped into my head. Like
Mhm.
he was there in an instant and he wouldn't let me stop. So
Yeah.
he just
I'm
kept
sure he took on a life of his own. That's
he
great.
did. Absolutely, he did. And it's busy being a mum and working and writing and all of those things. So
Mhm.
every time that it'd get to a point where I hadn't done anything on the book, and he would just come
Mhm.
into my head and go, "Come on, you've got to keep going.
That's
You've got
awesome.
to yeah, so you've got to get this done." So it did
Mhm.
take a long time, but once I found that storyline and once I decided the idea became easy. It was then a matter of finding the time to write the book and get that done.
Yeah, to kinda unfold the world, or whatever the process may be. I like the anchor that you have, like, an anchor into the creative process through the character, and I think that's kind of cool. I never really thought about, that for a writer. And it's not like I talk to a lot of writers, but I think it's pretty cool. It must have taken a bit of time, though. It sounds like. Would you mind talking about maybe the sort of the time frame, and then even showing the book a bit, if you have it? Yeah.
11 years.
Hmm.
11 years to write the book, and this is the book here. So well, the light's a bit glary, but yeah,
I like
so
that.
hopefully the cover gives people an idea about the type of flying that it is, and those in aviation will know, but those that don't, they'll be able to see the chicanes here
Hmm.
and understand that it's, yeah, racing flying. So that's the book and the cover, and the back cover's got, Jett on it, and that's his best friend Ella, who's also an aerobatic race pilot too. So the book
Hmm.
features a bit of rivalry between the two characters. That's
Okay.
one of the plot lines. They at the beginning of the novel, they're best friends. In the
Yeah.
middle of the novel, they're not so much best friends as competitors. And
Hmm.
yeah, and then so I won't give the ending away, but
Right.
yeah, they
That's pretty exciting.
yeah, it took 11 years because the creative process is you write the first draft, and then you go back and realize that it's not very good, and that you need to you need to write it again. So you write it
Mm-hmm.
again, and there was a point in this when I realized that it wasn't a very good story. So
Hmm.
originally, the first version of the story was that Jet wanted to be a pilot, um, but couldn't afford flying lessons. So he
Hmm.
entered a raffle, which was going to be a flight with a famous racing pilot, and that
Right.
had no tension, no action. It was very, very boring.
The concept was there, but like to your point, those yeah,
Not very
it's cool.
exciting. And
Hmm.
so I pivoted. I got someone to help me rewrite and restructure the novel, and
Hmm.
that's really where the idea of it becoming a competition and
Hmm.
actually having flying as the main feature came into play. So
Awesome.
it took so long because it took a couple of iterations to get the plot
Right.
line right and to get the story right.
Right. And I can imagine that you can probably remember if you go back and read your book. I'm imagining that at each thing that was each part of the story probably has a little bit of a tie to when it came into fruition, and so it's kind of not. It probably has a little parallel in terms of how it unfolded and with maybe your life and your career. So I tend to think that those kind of things are cool, and I think people doubt how much what they like to do can relate to what they already do. And I wonder for you, did you find any insight into how you were navigating your work and things like that through having to go through a creative process like that?
Oh, absolutely. It was great. And the problems that I had were really good because I could reach in and talk to people. I had not easy access, but I had access to people who could help me with some of the story problems. But
Right.
it was it was easy to think I had too much information. Do you know, like
Right.
what part of going to an airfield do I want to
Hmm.
bring into the book? Because it is
Uh-huh.
a sensory experience, right?
Right.
You smell things, you hear things, the wind picks up and it dies down, and the weather is important. And so,
Hmm.
so there's a lot that I could put in there that I
Yeah.
experience on a day-to-day basis, but I had to, you can't sit there and constantly write about the wind or the sky, and it has to have action in it. So,
I understand.
it was great to be able to think about what what would be interesting and different that people may not be aware of when you work in aviation. So, what are the things we take for granted by going out to an airport or an airfield every day? And being around planes every day. So that was really good. And then when it came
Hmm.
to the actual technical flying parts of it, I
Hmm.
work with pilots. Um, so I could ask them questions about the flying, what would they do? And I actually got a couple of my friends to read the flying scenes so
Hmm.
that they were authentic and that I hadn't said anything that was technically wrong. Because if I had gotten something wrong, I'm sure that people would have told me about that.
That's the hardest part about all of this. I've been doing this podcast. Well, it's been a while now. It's coming up. It's like 2 years. We're over 115-ish episodes. So it's been. I guess I didn't think about the fact that it's 2 years once we hit 108. That was 2 years worth of podcasts. So my biggest thing was, man, I don't want to get anything wrong. Luckily for me, I just get to ask a lot of questions. So I can understand the thought process, especially in aviation. Someone will be quick to let you know. uh, you said you work with pilots, and that was going to be one of my questions. And obviously, we work with pilots a lot. Seeing as how you do get to work with pilots, I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to pass on the opportunity to ask you about how some of those pilots maybe got to where they're at, some of the ones that you get to work with, and if you get to develop any, enough of a relationship with them to understand that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, especially when I was in the Air Force, because I was in flying squadron. So I was in a squadron and would go to
Hmm.
morning briefs every day and experience that as a squadron member. So every
Hmm.
day we were, they were in my world, I was in their world. And so,
Hmm.
yes, you become friends with a lot of pilots and you
Hmm.
hear their stories. And it's fascinating how common the thread is that it's something that we're all fascinated with when we were young, and a
Right.
lot of them wanted to be. That's all they wanted to do. They just wanted to be pilots, and that's what drove them, in my case, into the Air Force. But having said that, I've just recently I went down to a local airfield and went for a flight with a pilot who is a big promoter of STEM and
Mm.
aviation as a career, and he took me up for a flight, and we were down at this small little airfield, and some of his younger students or friends came up, and we were chatting. I was chatting to them as well, and it's the same thing. They wanted
Yeah.
they wanted to be pilots. They wanted to fly from a very young age. So it's
Mhm.
sort of like a calling. I think it's like some people end up in it by accident, but I think the vast majority, especially those that fly, do it because they've got a fascination and uh, they feel drawn to that, and that's what they want to do.
Right. It comes up often in the podcast that I'm talking to one of the pilots or the CFIs or even the student, and they'll say it over and over again. They'll talk about how once that bug bites you, you've got the itch forever, and you can't help it. You want to fly. Uh, and I don't think there's a whole lot of industries that are quite as fascinating to you when you're young that can actually turn into a really really nice career. And especially now, I think being an example of one, there's so many flight schools out for civilians even. You don't always even have to go through the military at this point. And I think you can kind of just with a quick Google search see that there's a flight school about around any major metroplex. If not, I mean, I don't even want to. It's probably more than that. There's airports everywhere. I had no idea before I started getting involved with aviation how common a small airfield was. I mean, you can drive by plenty every day. At least here in the U.S., that's what it's like. So
Yeah, it's the same here, and I don't think
yeah.
people realize how big recreational aviation is. I
Hmm.
think that, you go to these airfields when you're driving past them during the week, probably don't look very busy, but then on Saturday and Sunday, they come alive
Yeah.
because the weekend pilots come out and
Hmm.
mums and dads take their kids flying, and they just want to get up into the air. So
Absolutely.
it is, you're right. It's a far more popular than I think a lot of people realize.
Absolutely. And so, kind of on that note, I guess I'll zoom out a little bit. Uh, you talked about flying with one of your friends who is very into the STEM side of education, and then even you talk about the book and the it's like a middle aged book or not middle aged, sorry, middle grade book, and right, it's not middle aged, it's much different. Uh, yeah, it was not misleading, very misleading. But even as we talk about everyone commonly being intrigued when they're young, it makes me want to ask you about do you have sort of a take or a view on how we expose more young people to more aviation?
Well, yeah, I think I do. I think we need to. So I think selling flying as a pilot is a relatively easy thing to do because
Right.
it's, especially like, it was just this year, I think the anniversary, or just recently, the anniversary of Top Gun. So I think that sort of, and there's other movies and there's other things out there very generally about being a pilot.
Hmm.
But I think broadening that out and making people more aware of some of those other things and how big the aviation industry is, I think there's a lot of scope and a lot of room to get people involved who may not either be able to fly for visual
Hmm.
reasons or other things, but encouraging them to come into the industry because it
Hmm.
is a great industry and it has such a wide variety of jobs in support of actually maintaining aircraft and aircrew. So I think we have a lot more to do in that way, and I think there are fascinating organizations
Hmm.
that can do that. So there's aeronautical societies, there's women in
Hmm.
aviation, there's a whole range of organizations that are now starting to get more and more members, and
Hmm.
they go out and they have public events and they talk at careers days and go to schools and do school visits and start those conversations about all the different things you can do in this industry, and it doesn't just have to, it's that if you can't be a pilot you can't be involved. And I
Right.
think there's a lot that we can do, school visits, writing books about it, right? That's a
Right.
right. And then knowing that those books exist and then saying, hey kids, there's not just, the fact books and the non-fiction books, there's also other things that if you want to get a sense of it, that's a way to immerse yourself in that world, or at least start to get a taste for it. So I think
Absolutely.
there's things we can do, and we can really emphasize some of those organizations and get into schools and go to careers days. And I imagine you guys have careers days, right? Or you have days
Hmm.
where you open days and local families can come out and visit and sit in the planes and walk around the
Yes.
hangars and those sorts of things. So they're fantastic because I think that's the first step for some kids about thinking about what it would be like to be involved in
Right.
aviation.
And I think that exposure is a big part of it, especially when you're young, especially as we've talked about with everyone in their youth saying, "Oh, I mean, I want to do that," and they kind of keep going. We actually partner with, so we're on an airport in Addison, Texas, which is in Dallas, Texas, pretty much, and uh, it's a pretty busy airport. It's near one of the major airports, DFW, and so what's cool about this is that on the other side, there's a high school called Rising Aviation, and they're sort of they're sort of have the same goal that we're talking about now, and kids get to get they have they have a school on the airport. They get to go out the backside of the school, and there's like a hangar back there, and I think we've maybe sold them a Piper Archer or something like that, and we partner with them. We do some video stuff, and sometimes we'll have them come over or we'll go visit them. But we're trying to do things like that, and we also have an open house once a month. We call it Thrust Day. It's pretty cool because we'll do like food and games, and we'll have like maybe an airline pilot speaker, and we've began to open it up to the public a lot more because we figured, especially with the way social media is and everything now, getting out in the world, there's no exposure like that. And yeah, so we invite everyone to the hangar once a month on Thrust Day. So it's a quick plug on our side. We do that. Um, one part of it is the exposure to the kids, but it's also the somehow educating more of the general public that are adults. So I'm thinking about the parents of the kids. I'm imagining a kid that says, "Oh, wow, look at that plane," and I'm thinking as a parent who may not know anything about aviation, what what can they do in that scenario to kind of educate themselves or learn a little bit more about what their kid is interested in?
Well, I think it's like you were saying that you have open days, and I think
Hmm.
if like my dad did, he went out and found out some things like
Hmm.
about Air Cadets, and just and we didn't have the internet then, right? So he had to. I don't know how he did it, but but he
Exactly.
found
Now you
out
can Google it.
that now, that now it's faster, and I think and easier to get that information. And I think a couple of things that parents can do is they can go and look at when fly aero clubs and flying clubs have open days. There are
Hmm.
aviation high schools, like you mentioned, the school across the airfield from you in
Hmm.
Brisbane, that we have an aviation high school that is out near the airport. So if you've got kids that are interested, especially in that sort of senior primary, junior high school area, time frame, there's
Hmm.
things that you could do to really encourage that. If that was something, getting them into a different school was something you were you could do. But I
Hmm.
also think just going to the like you and I talked about, there's little airfields everywhere, and just one
Hmm.
day ringing up and saying, "Hey, can we just come out for a morning and see what it's about?" And then taking your kids out there, and you're not necessarily going to get a flight, but you'll get to
Right.
see how busy these little places are, and you'll get to see the mums and dads taking kids for a fly, and
Hmm.
you'll get to see the communities and get a feeling of what that's like, and talk to people about how do you get in, how do I get my child a flight, how do we
Yes.
encourage this love of flying and aviation. And they may have ground schools, they may have little ground schools that kids can go to, or they may have school holiday activities and things like that. And I know
Hmm.
I'm just about to next week go into a bookshop and do a workshop on paper planes and
Awesome.
flying paper planes, which is again a great way to inspire kids' enthusiasm or interest in aviation, because it's you can make very simple or very complex paper
Hmm.
planes, and you can make ones that have flight controls, and so you can test and adjust them. So
That's
you've
really cool.
getting yeah, it is. I'm super
Yeah.
excited about it.
Yeah.
So for parents, keep an eye out for those sorts of things, and
Hmm.
yeah, just ring up and see if there's something you can do, and go and
Hmm.
meet some people. Sometimes aviation or aero clubs have people that are happy to meet you and ask. You can ask questions and get the kids,
Yeah.
asking questions and those sorts of things. So there's a lot now I think you can do to inspire and at least um, take kids to that next step, and get them starting to think about it and visit an airfield.
Okay, and so since we've been talking a little bit about some of these things, um, I probably have only a few more questions, and I'm hoping I can keep them all before I forget. But I do want to expand a little bit more on the book and ask you and make sure we capture this before we get going. What is something that you would want people to get out of the book? Like maybe if maybe you're talking to a parent and you're wondering if the parent's wondering, oh, should I get this for my kid or something like that? What would you want them to get out of this book?
I think mainly there is a it's I want them to feel the love of aviation in the book, and I want for kids to know that they're not alone in that love of aviation. But to talk a little bit more about the plot of the book,
Hmm.
Jett does want to be an aerobatic race pilot, and
Hmm.
the situation that he's in at the beginning of the book is he's in a small country town in outback Queensland, and
Hmm.
they have an annual air show. And part of that air show this time is that they're bringing in a junior race. So the global racing competition is starting a junior competition, and their airfield is going to be the first one to have it. And so
Hmm.
Jett's dad is an instructor and a pilot himself, and he enters
Hmm.
Jett into this competition. But it's Jett's mum who's a little bit more hesitant
Hmm.
to let him go in it, because it is a more dangerous, risky form of flying,
Hmm.
and so she's a bit reluctant. But and this is not a spoiler. This happens in the second chapter. But Jet's dad then dies in an aviation accident, which
Hmm.
then so the risks, I think, that associated with flying are very present in the book. But I also think what comes through is that you can do things safely, that you can still fly in a dynamic, risky competition and still be safe about how you do it.
And let alone the perseverance that is there. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's physically demanding as well.
Mhm.
And so many things can go wrong. And you know, when
Mhm.
you're writing a book, you've got to focus on things that go wrong. That's what
Mhm.
gives you conflict and tension. So I
Yeah.
had to write a list of all the things that could potentially go wrong, and I listed them out from very minor to catastrophic. And they have to come through in the book. But I think also the life and death stakes as well that can be that that are present in flying, and sort of what makes it exciting, but
Mhm.
also, you know, it's also fuels people's fear. That's very
Mhm.
present in the book as well.
Mhm.
So I don't shy away from that in the book.
Mhm.
That's very front and center. But I also try to emphasize there's a safety element and a training element and a preparation element and all of these
Mhm.
things that go to mitigate that. And you know, Jett's a 14-year-old boy, so there's some things about him that a very 14-year-old boy like.
Mhm.
He doesn't always think things through. He doesn't think about the consequences. So part
Mhm.
of his journey is to be really gung-ho or really devil may care at the beginning, but then think a little bit more about the consequences of his actions as he goes through the
Mhm.
book. So he matures and becomes a better aviator because he thinks about more things and he thinks about the consequences by the end of it. So I really want people to walk away with that sense of excitement, but also understand the industry is a little bit more, and understand that safety is always paramount too. And it's not overt. It's just something that through the events of the story, it happens organically. So
Right.
it's not preachy. It's not didactic in that way. It's just very inherent, because it's inherent in the nature of the world
Mhm.
that we live in.
Absolutely, and I like that there's it seems like there's a few layers there, and so maybe I'll have to do a little bit of my own research. Who knows? May end up reading it just to know what you're talking about. But I just want to say thank you for joining us. And if there's anything you'd like to say to anyone out there who's thinking about, you know, obviously we do flight training. It's a career path program for us, and there's a lot of recreational options around us as well. If there's anything you would say to people who are curious about aviation, maybe for themselves, what would you say?
Oh, just go for it. Seriously, it's like I have loved it. I've been working in this industry for like 35 years, and do what you can. Do what you can, and don't let setbacks get in your way. You know, don't let the first failure or thing that doesn't work out stop you from wanting to be involved in it. Work out a way that you can be involved. So that's something that I would really encourage people to do. Just because things don't go the way you always want them to, and in my case it didn't quite go the way I wanted it to, but I still found a way to work in an industry that I really enjoy working in, and being around aircraft, which I find awesome. So that is
Mhm.
something that I would encourage people to do. Work out a way, if it's something you want to do, how to do it or be involved with it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for sitting down and chatting with us for a little while. I think I have plenty of questions that go through my mind still, but for the sake of keeping this, easy to watch, I guess, I want to make sure people hear the things you have to say. I'll ask one more time. What's the title of the book? One more time.
So the
Jett
title of the
Cooper.
book is Jett Cooper,
Jett Cooper.
and
Yes.
it's available on my website. You can go to my website, which is melaniehill.au, and you'll
Mhm.
find a copy, how to get it there. And it's available internationally. So you can get it in the US from all of the major online book retailers. So you just
Mhm.
type in Jett Cooper, and it's M.A.C. Hill, so M.A.C. Hill, and they're my initials. So you can get it online at all of those bookshops, or you can go to my website and find out where it's for sale there.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, we'll have this going up here pretty soon, but I'm excited to share this. We haven't had anyone who's written anything, or anyone from, really, you're our first, actually, you are going to be our first international podcast episode. So that's pretty exciting. And we were excited to talk to you, and I've had a pleasure getting to know you. So thanks again. So if you're still listening, thank you. Like, comment, subscribe. It helps more people find out more information about aviation. And thank you for watching. My name is Zach, and I'll see you guys on the next episode next week.